Okay, it's a minute after the hour. Hope we'll have some other people join, but we already have a really good group, and I don't want to keep people waiting. So I'm going to jump in and get started. Just a couple notes first. Let me introduce myself. My name is Amy Ray. I'm a managing director here at Zeldis Research. I think a lot of you who are registered know me. Some of you don't, so welcome. It's good to have you. Um, there is a Q&A. There should be a Q&A button. Please use that at any point if you have questions for me or if you're having any issues or technical issues. Please use that to let me know. I'll keep that open. But we're going to jump in. I'm excited to share with you today some research on research that we did at Zeldis Research here about AI moderation and seeing kind of how it works and what are the pros and cons, and really with a focus on what is the respondent experience in an AI moderated setting. So let me jump in and tell you kind of a little bit about first why did we do this? So just to kind of no surprise, and this is just like an example smattering of companies in recent years who have put out an AI moderation offering. There are many more. I just pulled some of them that came up at the top and that I know about. Um, it's anybody in the industry who's been to a conference in the last, 2 to 3 years knows that AI is revolutionizing market research. And, we at Zeldis have been using it, adopting aspects of it over time. We use it for things like transcriptions, summarization and valuation of qualitative data, to get top line insights, those kinds of things. But we're seeing more and more of that people are introducing the idea of AI moderating qualitative research. Zeldis is a firm that does both quant and qual. About 50% of our work is qual. We have nine full-time qualitative moderators. So this is something that's definitely of interest to us. And not in a, oh no, it's gonna, take my job sort of way, but more, what can this do? And how can we leverage it in ways maybe with, in combination with human moderated research, but we really wanted to understand kind of the landscape and how this is working. So we decided we are going to pilot some of these platforms that do AI moderation. So what did we do for this that I'm going to share with you today? First, and this is really important as we're going through all of what we talk about today, and that is we piloted for this, we piloted one AI platform, right? Our plan is to do this continuously over the next year or so, continually piloting other partners that do AI moderation, so we can get a sense of what's out there. So we started with one, a company we already knew and had a relationship with. I'm not going to share in this platform who that was, but just everything we talk about today is in the context of this is one AI platform, and there are others, and some might be better or worse or the same. I can't speak to all of that. I can only speak to the experience we had here. So we decided it would be interesting to replicate a previous qualitative study that we had done with human moderators. So we replicated a study we did back in 2022 about teletherapy and about sort of the advantages and disadvantages of teletherapy as it compares to in-person therapy, which became, pretty important, especially after COVID, right? There was a move to that. And so we had done this in 2022. And we decided it would be interesting to have a study we'd already done so that we could kind of compare what we find. So it was not exact, the guide wasn't exactly the same, but it was pretty similar to that study. So we had folks, 10 individuals, complete AI moderated interviews, about 30 minutes, which was the same as the live stuff we had done with a human moderator. We then, and this is where we're going to spend the most of the time in this webinar, we then did human moderated focus groups and IDIs with folks after they had done the AI moderated interview to talk about their experience, to understand what that was like from a respondent perspective. And that was a big focus. We wanted to understand sort of how it changes for the respondent, not just, how is it different from a research perspective and even a results perspective. So that is part of what you're going to hear is the results of those human moderated follow-ups that we did to the AI moderated interviews. Um, and just to let you know, kind of level set, the 10 people that we spoke to were a mix of Gen Z, Millennial, and Gen X. So they ranged in age from 19 to 55. We didn't include boomers in this particular duration. It doesn't mean we won't in the future, but this is what we started with here. So let's talk a little bit about, or let me share a little bit about the logistics, the practicality of executing this from a research perspective. Now, I'm not going to spend a ton of time here because this is very specific to the platform we used, right? So all of the things I'm going to share on the next two slides are specific to this platform, probably. But we thought it was valuable for you to see some of the bumps that we encountered so that these are questions you could ask if you're evaluating partners for AI moderation, right? Things just to be aware of, watch outs, right? Things to be asking about if you're going to kind of take this leap. So that's what I'm going to talk about. So first on sort of the front end side, the first thing we this platform, and I think most offer the option that the AI can write the discussion guide for you. You can give it a list of, your overall research objectives at a high level, the questions you want answers to, and it will write a discussion guide for you. It did okay. It didn't do great. The flow wasn't great. It was repetitive and things were asked in strange order, but the question wording was okay. But it took a good amount of work. It didn't take 100% of the time it would have taken me to write a guide from scratch, but it probably took 60 to 70% of the time. So it saved time, but it got part of the way there, but not a ton of the way there. So just again, something to demo to think about. When it came to the guide, this particular platform, you couldn't do full branching. So you could ask a probe based on what someone said, but you couldn't like, if they say this, now ask them these five questions. And if they said this, ask them these five questions. I didn't have that level of sophistication. So again, just something to keep in mind as you're vetting. Um, it was a newer interface, so there were just some bugs, things that they said they were working on. So again, looking out when you're looking out, perhaps look for more established or been around a little bit, been out of beta for a while. Um, this is interesting, and this is probably true across platforms, but just not something we thought about. Once we had the guide the way we wanted it, it was very easy to program into the platform. But we wanted to test it, just like you test a questionnaire that you program. But in this case, it's not the same every time. And it's not supposed to be, right? It's supposed to be customized, but it just made testing it a little more challenging because every time you'd go in to test it, it would be a little bit different depending on not just depending on what you said. Sometimes it was just different because it was different. So just again, there's nothing wrong with that, but it was an interesting thing that we didn't anticipate and something to keep in mind. We struggled to get the intro where we wanted it. It will not let you like script out an intro. You tell it kind of what the objective is and some high level things. And it took us a while to get it to where it gave an intro in a way that we were comfortable with. So that just took a little more tweaking. We had an issue with if someone left the interview or dropped and went back, it didn't recognize them. So it started a second interview. So again, that could just be this platform, but something to think about. And in this case, for this platform, if we wanted to make a change once we had published the guide, and we couldn't. We had to like create a copy of the project and do it and then republish it. Again, it's just a tweak, but something maybe to ask about if you're vetting. And then on the other side, on the back end, as you might expect, an AI moderation platform has tools on the back end to use AI to analyze your data. And we had some issues with that as well. First, we couldn't download the transcriptions. We could only copy them and paste them out. The summary report, AI summary report it created, could only be in PDF or PowerPoint. Not a huge deal, but just little things. The customization in summary reporting was more cumbersome than we've seen in other AI tools in terms of being able to query it and customize where you want it to be. So again, something you probably want to demo and check out on any tool that you would use. And finally, just generally, we did not find the quality of the reporting to be to be great, lacked in detail and relevant findings. In fact, I took the transcripts from the AI moderated interviews and put them into another AI tool we use called Quillet to get a summary report that was more useful for me. So all things you'll want to like look at and demo and test if you're evaluating different platforms before you jump in. So that was our specific kind of just logistical case. Um, let's talk about the meat of this, and that is the respondent experience and their assessment of that experience. Certainly do not question the value of AI moderating when you think about the scale, the scope that you can do, how many you can do, how quickly you can do them, the cost savings that it might represent. All of those things are pretty clear advantages to doing AI moderation and qualitative research. But I think it's really important in the work that we do to center the respondent, to center the people that we're talking to and gathering feedback from. I mean, the same thing with a quantitative survey, right? When we write surveys, it's important to think about, is this too onerous? Is it too long? Is it cumbersome? Is it user friendly? I think it's important that we don't just look at AI moderating as the money it can save and the scale it can give us, but that we also look at what is the actual experience like for the respondent, and frankly, how that experience could then, and I can't speak to that here, but how that experience could impact the feedback that they're giving, right? So we're going to talk about what the respondent experience, what we heard from our respondents in the human moderated follow up. And just as background, they did the AI interview within a day and a half of doing the human moderated follow up about it. So it was pretty quick. They had just done it, most of them same day. So first thing that we wanted to level set when we were talking to them and we were getting their feedback before we jumped into, hey, what was it like, right, to do this AI moderated interview? We wanted to just get a sense of how they felt about AI in general, because we thought that could impact their perceptions of the experience. So we talked about their attitudes about AI. And this is where we found our first really interesting sort of contradiction or paradox. And we'll see another one later in what we present. But generally speaking, folks were mixed to negative to mixed on AI. They did see some value, potential value, but when you asked about them in general at first, the negatives came out more. Like they had a lot of sort of concerns or drawbacks that they saw. So to just give you a sense of the ones that came out the most often, when we weren't asking what are the negatives. This is just when we were talking about, hey, how do you feel about AI in general? These are the things that kind of came up first. The environmental impact. We have people say, oh, my electric bill is higher because of AI. Job displacement, of course. Really strong and stronger among our younger respondents are the ethical considerations, the fact that there's a perception that AI steals, that basically, anything anyone's ever written or created is being used to feed AI. And so therefore you're kind of stealing folks' work. And we all know, there's certainly that's been in the media, the issues with that bias, garbage in, garbage out, right? So it is reflecting the bias of everything that's being input into it. And privacy, not knowing, you're giving stuff to AI and what's happening to that. So again, these were all things that came out without sort of, hey, tell me what are some of the things you don't like about AI. Just, hey, how do you feel about AI? We asked everybody to rate just their general feeling about AI on a scale of 1 to 10. Almost everyone was a 3 to 6. So that gives you a sense. It's sort of like middle, but skews towards the bottom. We had 1, 2, and 1, 7. No 8, 9, 10. So again, that it sort of averaged around a 4, right? It was mixed to negative. But on the flip side of that, almost every single person used AI every single day. So they don't like it. They sort of say all these things about it that they don't like. But when you ask them if they use it and how often they use it, yeah, I use it and I use it pretty much every day. One person of everyone we talk to doesn't use it and in fact actively avoids it, right? Turns it off in all of their search engines so it doesn't come up in Google, just doesn't use it. They were the person who gave it to. They really were very negative about AI. But they're using it, and they're using it every day, and they're using it for what you might expect, like writing, right? Writing emails or memos or things. Students using it for academic support, people using it in their job to help them with different job functions, transcriptions, meal and travel planning, which I thought was really interesting. Fun things with their kids, like making fun things on AI. Generally, they're using it for things, I mean, fun as well, but they're using it to save themselves time, to do things more efficiently, right? They see the value of AI being able to be more efficient and help them save time and take things off their plate. So again, they don't like it, but but they use it and they see the value. So this will kind of come back around when we summarize what we learned. So let's talk about what was their impression of experiencing an AI moderated interview. How did that go? How did they feel about it? Well, similarly, the reaction was negative to neutral or neutral to negative, whatever you want to say. They described it as awkward, impersonal, robotic, unsatisfying compared to a human interaction. Okay, so they didn't love it. They didn't like passionately. Most of them didn't passionately hate it, but they didn't like it. And it was some of them were like it was okay. It was okay. And I'm just gonna play a little video, and I'm gonna share my video, and hopefully you all can hear the sound on the video when I play it.
There's that uncanny valley of giving the impression of active listening that it's doing. That yeah, like when you're having a real conversation with people, you know, you can tell when people are listening or when they're tuning out, and it's when you're speaking to an AI, it's going to make the sounds to make it seem like it's listening, but I don't know, it just the texture of having a real conversation with someone is difficult to replicate.
It was fine. It seemed a little monotonous. It didn't really have the human element of unique follow-up questions. It felt like a script, which, humans follow scripts too. It's fine, but um, I wouldn't prefer it to a human interviewer, but it was all right.
Um, well, sort of like in regards to like being impersonal, it's very the responses especially were very sort of like curt and minimal. It doesn't like talk with like a person who like knows how humans operate. It's more of like a it feels extremely clinical.
But it felt like it had a ladder, like a script that it was going through, and so it would say like, "Oh, thanks for this, but we're going to move on to the next question," without actually like responding to what I had said. And in the beginning, it was like, "Do you have any more questions?" And I was like, "Oh, I have this question. That's a good point. Do you have any more questions?" It asked that like 3 or 4 times, so it's like I felt like I was talking to myself, which I was.
He was talking to himself. That's kind of true. So you can hear it was like a range of not like feeling like it lacked that human feel, to it's okay, it's okay. And that was pretty consistent with what we heard. And some of this you'll see in some specifics. So let's talk about the things that folks really didn't like. And I'm going to be honest, like the negatives were strong, right? That I said in general they didn't like this. So when we talked about negatives and positives, the negatives were pretty strong. And the biggest one we heard was around being repetitive and redundant. So, for example, if I'm moderating, I moderate all the time, right? If I ask a question and someone's giving me an answer and they're talking about some stuff, and somehow in that answer, they answer a question that's down here in my guide. When I get to that part of the guide, I'm going to skip it, right? Because they've already answered. I'm not going to ask it again. This AI couldn't do that properly. So if they answered a question up here, that and answered or a question that was going to come later in this question, it still asks that question later. Now maybe that again, that could be platform specific. There could be more sophisticated AI that is better than that, but in this case it wasn't doing that job, so that felt frustrating to respondents because it was being repetitive. I got a question. I'm just going to answer these as they come in. And that is, was the moderator a human appearing bot? It was not. There wasn't like an avatar connected. So it was a voice, it was a person talking like I am now, but there wasn't a visual. There was closed captioning of what the AI was asking, but it was a voice. It wasn't, there was no picture. So what else did it not like? Repetitive and redundant. Oh, I should another element of the repetitiveness that I thought was interesting. It would use like transition phrases to try to seem more conversational. So for example, I give an answer and the AI would say noted and then go on to the next thing, right? And except for it would say noted every time. And so it would be very repetitive. But then for another interview, it might say something else. Like, okay, I've heard that. But it would say that every time. So it was interesting that it was repetitive for one person, but it could have mixed up some of those sort of transition phrases and it didn't do that. Again, platform specific. I don't know. We're gonna be learning more as we do this with more of these and which ones maybe can maybe solve for some of these issues. So the tone and voice inconsistencies and lags. So again, could be platform specific, but there was a change in like the voice between the sort of pre-planned scripted questions and the probes. It was like the voice would get louder or it would change a little bit. Like they could notice sort of a change, and that was distracting to them and felt less realistic. Also, there'd be sometimes pauses. The AI would pause for a long period of time, and the respondent like didn't know what to do with that. So that was another thing. This one's really interesting, and I think this one might play across platforms because this was more on the respondent side. They were afraid to pause and think because they knew they're talking to an AI, and they were afraid if they paused too long, AI would just ask the next question. Because how does AI know that they're just thinking, right? Like I might know I might see it, with body language. But so that made them feel like this forced, I have to talk until I'm done because then I'm going to get the next question. Interestingly, and we'll see on the next slide, the AI was actually pretty patient, but there was this perception that it wouldn't be and that it would jump ahead if they paused too long. Tech issues, again, platform specific, but there were like in the beginning, it was like they didn't know when it was going to start, and at the end, they didn't know it was over. There was a couple drop issues. So just things to think about. Impersonal, right? And we heard that in the video. It just felt like going down someone's checklist, right? It just didn't feel as human. And this was a big one too. And this will come out when we, kind of make our conclusions about human versus AI moderating. And that is that the probing it was very scripted and the probing was not customized, right? It didn't do as good of a job at reacting specifically to what someone said and having a probe based on that. It would probe, but the probes would be more generic. Do you have anything else to say about that? Do you have any other thoughts? As opposed to kind of, there was one person gave one example of when I probed on this in my moderating of it. They said something and the AI said, "Can you give me an example in your life where you did that?" Or something that was a little more custom, and they really liked that. But for the most part, it did not do that. So that again could be just a sophistication of this particular AI or as AI develops as a tool. But that was something that is lacking. And I think we'll see when we kind of draw our conclusions that that's an important thing that's lacking in terms of what you want to get out of qual, right? Is one of the advantages of qual is to get that depth and get that probing and that sort of customized probing. So there were also some positives, more lukewarm. And these two slides, strong negatives, lukewarm positives. I think it's kind of interesting because I feel like I could put those adjectives in because I moderated and I could hear it and see it. I don't know if you're just looking at the transcripts of the interviews like an AI would, if you would be able to tell the sort of force behind the negatives versus the positives. You would just see a list of negatives they talked about and a list of positives they talked about. And I'm not sure you'd know the sort of depth of that. So I do think that's kind of interesting that the human moderator in me was able to kind of pull that out in body language and tone. And maybe AI could as well. I'm not saying it couldn't. I think that's an interesting question. So some of the things that they said that were positive, they actually we got the intro to a place where they felt it was helpful, gave them the context they needed. One person mentioned, they got a question from the AI and they said, I don't really understand what you mean. Can you clarify? And AI was able to reword the question in a way that made sense. So she found that was very helpful. It stays on topic, very much on topic, right? It doesn't stray, which is a good thing. But I guess I also could make an argument that sometimes when you moderate as a human, you make a personal connection or you do something that's off topic that creates a connection and a rapport. So it can be a positive and a negative, I think, to be, fully stay on topic. Summarization. So everyone talked about how it did a good job of sort of speaking back to them what they had said, which most of the time they liked, and it gave them the opportunity to clarify if there was something that was off. But they also felt that got it repetitive because it did that every single time. And so that was kind of in between. There was a positive, but there was some negative aspect to it. It did probe. It didn't probe as customized and as deeply and as often, but it did kind of say, do you have anything else to say about that? Accessibility, there were a couple people mentioned there's captioning and people like that. They like the sense that, if they're not audio processors, that was helpful. Although theoretically that could be on human moderated as well. It was polite. Oh, sorry, patience first, then it's polite. Patience, I mentioned, they were scared to pause, but at the end of the day, those that did pause or had that experience felt it was patient. It didn't interrupt them. It didn't jump on them with the next question. Then it was polite. They thought it was nice. It was like the tone was nice, which I'm sure, which is important because that is makes it seem closer to a human that it's being nice and polite. And at the end of the day, it got, oh, I keep jumping ahead. They liked the convenience, right? I mean, this was only one interview, one time, but they liked the idea they could do it whenever they wanted during the day, go in and do it, as long as they did it before, the human moderated discussion. They all saw that as a very clear benefit, and I think that is a very, very clear benefit of it. And then before I get to the last one, which will transition us into the next slide, I want to mention pace because that was something we asked about, like how quickly or slowly the conversation went and the AI spoke. And that was a little bit mixed. About half the people thought it was good, and half the people thought it was too slow, which I thought was interesting. Nobody thought it was too fast. So I'm sure it's trying not to be, right, so that more people can understand it. A couple of people felt they wished it would go a little faster, but most people, or about half said that it was fine the way it was. And the last one I have on here is that they felt, we asked them and they felt it got at the basic information from what they could tell, right? Based on what the questions were that they heard, they felt like AI probably captured the basics of what we were trying to learn. And I will say that I think that is true. And one of the advantages of the fact that we replicated a past study that we had done is that I could look at that. I could look at the findings from the AI moderated interview and look at the findings from the human moderated interviews we had done a few years ago, which I did. And at the end of the day, the basic results were consistent, right? The key findings were consistent. So, in terms of consistency with what we did, the human moderated interviews we did a few years ago, very consistent in terms of how the people found a therapist, what their priorities are in therapy, the most important advantages of teletherapy, the most important disadvantages of teletherapy. All of those lists of things were almost identical, right? They were very, very similar. It came out in both, not specifically asked about, but in both the human moderated and the AI moderated, there was a finding of this idea that a hybrid approach could be good, right? Doing a first few sessions of therapy in person and then switching to teletherapy. We didn't ask that as a question in the guide, in either guide, but that came out in both. So I thought that was interesting. There were a couple of things that were not the same, right? Where maybe the AI moderating might have missed. It might not have missed. It's a different group of people, right? So you don't know for sure if it missed things or it's just, because of the different people that we were talking to. And it's qual, so it's not huge numbers. This one, though, I think is pretty clear and consistent and sort of makes sense. And that is that the human moderated interviews generated more expansive, like longer, more in depth, and more emotional quotes. So it's very clear when you read through the transcripts that you're getting more depth, you're getting more sharing, right? They're talking more, and there's more emotion in those things than what we hear in the when they're answering the AI. Whether that matters or not is up for debate, right? I would posit that it depends on your objectives and what research you're doing and what you're looking to find from the research, right? That could be very important, or if it's a very straightforward study, it might not be. There was some nuance and depth missed in the discussion of the disadvantages of teletherapy. The human interviewers, the interviewees went a little bit deeper, came up with like implications of some things that just kind of took it a step further. And we missed some of the challenges in finding a therapist. So how they found like the source for finding a therapist came out, but not necessarily like some of the bumps that we heard in the human moderated. Again, that could just be different people, different experiences, but those are some of the differences we found. I think at the end of the day, when I look at the guide for this, the teletherapy interview, it was pretty simple and straightforward. We were not the objective or the content was not around, anything in depth about the therapy. It was about why might you want to do teletherapy? Why might you not? What's better with in person and what are the barriers? And I do think it was a more straightforward study. And so at the end of the day, maybe I'm not surprised that we found very similar findings. So I don't think, besides the quotes, if I wrote the report, it would look very similar. So, I mean, that I think that's a good thing. But let's talk about kind of AI versus human and when it might work and when it might not or work less. So let's kind of talk about overall from the respondent perspective what we heard and maybe what we can draw from that. So this is my second contradiction in my presentation here today. And that is every single respondent strongly prefers human moderation. And keep in mind, right, they did an AI moderated interview and then they immediately did a human moderated. So they kind of had both, right, within a 24 to 48 hour period. And every single person, and not just a little bit, right? But all but one person would absolutely do AI moderated interviewing or research in the future. So they don't like it. They prefer humans. It wasn't great, but yeah, I would totally do it again. I would do I would participate, right? It wouldn't stop me from participating. One person, and not interestingly, not the person from the beginning I mentioned who really didn't like AI. He was open to doing it again. It was somebody different who really didn't like the experience and felt it was very impersonal. And why this? They say they clearly like this, but they would still do this. They mentioned the convenience, right? It's just a lot easier. I can do it whenever I want. And some mentioned that their view is that it will probably get better, that this is early days, and that if I do this in a year, it might be much more sophisticated, it might be much better. And it's just, I don't like it, but I like participating in research or I like giving my views. And so it wouldn't be a barrier for me if it were AI moderated. They're pretty practical about that. So interesting that, I've been sharing this with internally with my colleagues. That's like, yeah, nobody likes it, but they would do it. They would still do it. But I think as a industry, we have to talk about and think about whether the fact that they don't really enjoy the experience impacts the feedback that they give. So in this case, the study we did, the questions were very straightforward. What are the advantages of teletherapy? What are the disadvantages? If I'm doing a concept evaluation or a product evaluation, do you like this? Do you not like this? If I'm not enjoying my experience, does that have any impact on my feelings for what I'm evaluating? I don't know the answer to that, but it's certainly something to consider and to think about as we decide where we might use AI moderating versus not. So I'm going to just play another video, kind of people talking about the human versus AI.
Like the basics. Like I think it's the kind of thing, it's a good tool. I think if for some reason you're in a situation where you needed to like weed out certain people, probably like for something maybe. But like if you want to dig deep, no.
Yeah. There wasn't a lot of color opportunities. It was, yeah, just your first impression, no, like, oh, speak more about that. I didn't feel like that was captured at all.
Felt like it was got the job done, but it was just very surface, not super in depth with really like how I feel.
I think that this one is definitely like more comfortable and it flows better, whereas with the I don't know, it felt like I was a little uncertain of what I was saying and if it was enough because there was like such a long pause afterwards. I was like, should I be saying more? Is it expecting something else? So I feel like in that aspect, this was definitely better. And then obviously, like, you're asking me questions about stuff that I've said, and the other one, it just felt like too programmed to me, honestly. Like, it felt like it was just like a set questionnaire, like I could click a response on a Google form or something. Whereas this definitely, it's obvious that you need to be talking to someone for this.
So it just gives you kind of a little bit of flavor of people kind of comparing she was saying this, she was talking about the human moderated interview versus the AI and kind of what those differences look like. And a little bit around you heard surface, you heard not deep, right? And that's a kind of what our at least our respondents felt when we were comparing, right? So they acknowledge that AI moderating succeeds in gathering sort of that basic surface level information that's relevant to your research topic, right? Your objectives. But and so like they think that that could work if you were doing something that was simple and straightforward, right? That was, you know, I didn't put the quote in here, but someone said something like if you're doing a questionnaire, but you wanted a little bit more depth, right? You wanted a little bit more uh, open-ended qualitative feedback. So you don't need to go as deep, perhaps in situations where respondent convenience is really important, right? Maybe they're hard to reach or busy audience. You needed a high volume, you needed to do a lot of them very quickly. This would work well. They also mentioned that, there's potentially less moderator bias because it's the same AI doing each interview versus, and they're not human. So they are maybe more consistent than a human would be. But on the flip side of that, they emphasize that there's significant limitations in the level of depth, in nuance. That came up a couple times. There's no nuance and quality of the experience compared to human moderation. And so some of the places they really didn't feel it would be appropriate would be anything that's complicated or complex, anything where you wanted deep or emotional feedback, more nuance or detail, or you think about, this was consumer and I think we're a ways away from testing this with B2B. We do a lot of B2B qual. There's a lot of nuance there, right? There's a lot of vocabulary. There's a lot of industry specific knowledge that I would be concerned if nuance is an issue that wouldn't be at this point as easy to capture. If you needed more flexibility or branching in your discussion. And interestingly, because this is a little bit the opposite of what we thought, I mentioned, we've been talking about the AI moderated interview was about teletherapy. It wasn't super sensitive, right? It wasn't asking them what they were in therapy for. But but therapy in general feels like a sensitive topic, and we chose it because we thought, well, maybe people would be more comfortable talking to an AI about a sensitive topic. Maybe that's an advantage of AI, is that it's something you might be embarrassed or uncomfortable talking to a human. But at least our respondents felt the opposite. They felt, no, I don't trust AI. I wouldn't want to tell AI anything too sensitive because I don't know where it's going, and I'd be worried about privacy concerns. So it was a little bit of a surprise that we didn't expect. And they felt also a rapport and a connection is going to work better to open people up when it's a more sensitive topic. And AI, what in this case, was not doing a great job at that. Um, so, all food for thought in terms of, first, at Zeldis, we need to figure out how much of this is just AI moderation in general, how much of it is specific to the platform we used. Are there better AI tools out there that might solve some of those issues from a respondent experience perspective? and make it a smoother experience and overcome some of those negatives, maybe make it more natural and comfortable for folks. We need to figure out, will it advance in a way where we would feel comfortable with more complex things or B2B, which I think, again, it's about half of the qual that we do. So that's really important to us. Again, I see that as a little further out, at least from our perspective. So our plan is to continue to pilot a number of different AI moderation tools and to do it with different topics and different research objectives, right? This was pretty high level kind of general assessment, attitude and usage, right? And so maybe we do concept test, or product test or something like that. And maybe we do some kind of journey map, right? So to understand not only are there different partners and tools that are different, but also does it work better or worse with certain kinds of research? Maybe, and then at some point, certain kinds of respondents, right? I think we'll stick with consumers at least for the next couple of pilots. So who knows? This may be the start of a series. We may continue to do these as we pilot so we can share our experience out. I, of course, as always, anytime I've done any of these things, am more than happy to discuss it further or discuss more about it or answer any more specific questions. You should always feel free to reach out. Happy to do a call, happy to chat over email. And of course, anybody who has any other questions, please, I welcome them in the chat. If you have anything else, I think I answered the one question. I don't see any others here. So I'll give it another second because I see, oh, people are starting to drop off. Definitely feel free to reach out. Thank you again for coming.